When you think of Sherman's march to the sea, you probably picture one of the final, most brutal campaigns of the American Civil War. But, beyond all the battlefield tactics, there's this powerful and honestly a much lesser-known economic story. It's a story about what happens when an economy isn't just damaged, but completely broken. And it holds lessons that, believe it or not, echo all the way to today. Okay, let's dive right into this.
All right, so picture this. It's late 1864. The Civil War has been raging for 3 long, bloody years. Union General William T. Sherman has just captured Atlanta. But his next move? It's not going to be a traditional military campaign. Nope. He's planning to wage war not just on the Confederate Army, but on the Confederacy's entire economic foundation, its very will to keep fighting.
And Sherman, well, he did not mince words. His intent was crystal clear. This wasn't just about defeating soldiers on a battlefield. This was a whole new strategy. The plan was to destroy the infrastructure, the agriculture, the property, everything that supplied the Confederate war effort. The goal was to make the cost of war so devastatingly high that the South would have absolutely no choice but to surrender.
So for more than a month, his 62,000 soldiers just carved this 300-mile path of destruction right through the heart of Georgia. And this was a region that, up until this point, had been largely spared from major battles. What's really wild is that historians now know Sherman actually used the 1860 census data to target the most agriculturally rich counties, for maximum economic impact.
What Sherman was doing here was basically pioneering what we now call a scorched earth policy. His troops tore up and destroyed 300 miles of railroad. They would heat the rails until they were red hot and then twist them around trees into these things that became grimly known as Sherman's neckties. They took thousands of horses and cattle, and get this, over 10 million pounds of corn. It was systematic, calculated economic warfare.
So, we've seen the strategy. Now, let's really look at the results. The immediate economic consequences were, to put it mildly, catastrophic.
Sherman himself put the price tag on the damage at $100 million. Now, you have to remember, in 1865, that was an almost unimaginable sum of money. We're talking billions of dollars today. This wasn't just a disruption. It was a direct and massive blow to the region's total wealth.
And what's so fascinating is the data that's come out of recent economic research. Look at this chart. It compares the counties that were directly in Sherman's path to their immediate neighbors. By 1870, the farm asset values in those March counties had just plummeted by a staggering 20% compared to the others. This shows you the damage was incredibly localized and precisely linked to where that army marched.
And this quote from a Georgia planner, wow. It just brings that data to life, doesn't it? This wasn't some abstract economic downturn on a chart. For thousands and thousands of people, it was the complete and total annihilation of their personal wealth, of their ability to make a living. It was total ruin.
So, the massive destruction, that part is clear. But this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. The biggest puzzle for economists and historians isn't just about the damage itself, but about what happened next, or maybe more accurately, what didn't happen.
You see, standard economic theory actually predicts that after a shock destroys a bunch of old capital, an economy should have a period of really rapid growth, right? You're rebuilding with new, often more efficient infrastructure and technology. It's supposed to be a snapback effect. So why didn't that happen here?
And this just illustrates the anomaly perfectly. We saw incredibly rapid reconstruction in places like Germany and Japan after World War II, and that was fueled by access to capital. But the post-war South? It just defied all expectations. Instead of a quick rebound, the entire region fell into decades of economic stagnation. Something was fundamentally different here.
And the answer to this whole mystery, as researchers now argue, doesn't lie in the visible destruction of farms and railroads. No, it lies in the invisible destruction of something far, far more critical to an economy.
Here's the crucial point. The financial system was completely wiped out. Nearly every single bank in Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina just shut its doors right after the war. Formal credit markets, the engine of any modern economy, they didn't just shrink, they completely evaporated. Without any access to capital, there was just no money to rebuild farms, factories, or businesses.
And this right here is the key takeaway of the entire story. Think about it. You can rebuild a burned-out cotton gin. You can relay a twisted railroad track. But you cannot easily rebuild an entire financial system that's based on trust and networks and capital. The physical destruction was temporary. The financial destruction was persistent.
And this financial collapse didn't just delay recovery by a few years, it cast a long, long shadow that shaped the South's economy for generations to come.
This timeline is just stunning when you really look at it. So while manufacturing started to bounce back by 1880, look at agriculture. The value of improved farmland in those March counties remained depressed all the way through 1920. That is more than 50 years after the war ended, a multi-generational depression tied directly back to that 300-mile path of destruction. And it was in the ruins of this capital-starved economy that a new institution arose: sharecropping. See, without banks to provide loans for land or supplies, this system emerged to connect landowners who had no cash with a workforce that had no land. And while it might have solved an immediate problem, it very often trapped generations of families, both black and white, in a brutal cycle of debt.
So when you zoom out, the story of Sherman's march becomes so much more than a military history lesson. It's really a powerful, timeless case study on resilience. It teaches us that the true foundation of an economy isn't just its physical assets, its buildings and roads, but its financial infrastructure, those invisible systems that allow it to rebuild and grow.
And that really makes you think about today, doesn't it? When we face our own modern catastrophes, whether they're natural disasters or pandemics or financial crises, this 160-year-old story forces us to ask a really important question. What are the invisible systems that we depend on, and how do we make absolutely sure they're strong enough to help us rebuild when the smoke finally clears?